I know exactly when I first started doing digital art because I posted the first piece I ever did on Instagram on June 4th, 2017. Let's redraw it. I was a Broadway kid in middle school, so this is fan art of Kevin from the Book of Mormon, which is embarrassing to admit, but there are, I guess, more embarrassing interests out there in the world. I never was a very artistic kid. I never liked art class, and I never really even drew on my homework or anything like that, but I consciously decided to start drawing when I was around 12, just because I wanted to be good at it, so I just started. And my first art account was created in 2017 during the summer, and it did end up getting hacked a few years later, and I lost all access to it, but I made a new account under my current name, and then a few years later I remade my Instagram account. So I've had about 3 accounts, and I've been posting pretty consistently on the internet since 2017. This piece was drawn with my finger on my iPhone on Medibang paint, and I'm fairly certain it took me about as long as this redraw took me, which is nice to think about, I guess. But I wanted to redraw it specifically because I think it's interesting to see the progress that I've made, especially as someone who is more insecure about my progression, as it's been kind of non-linear, and I never went to art school or anything, never even took art classes or anything like that. And I just thought it would be very fun to look back on my embarrassing old middle school art. Right off the bat, you can obviously tell that, I draw very fundamentally differently compared to how I used to. I have a more solid grasp of how people look and how necks, aren't 2 inches wide. I was very inspired by Lavender Town on YouTube here for that anatomical choice, but I don't really think it looks good in 90% of cases, so I stopped doing that as pretty often as soon as I hit high school, I think. I'm also able to more accurately use references, and as a side note, looking at photos of Andrew Rannells to draw this, just really, his expressions are very, very intense. It's a little scary, but I am more able to accurately portray the people that I'm drawing in a way that I just simply was not able to do back then, which I think is a nice skill to have. And I'm sure I was trying my best back then, but there are just limitations that I had with that. You might also notice how I'm just making this sketch pretty clean as I go along, and that is just because I am pretty lazy most of the time, and if I don't have to do line art, I won't, and I'll just turn the sketch into line art later, which we'll see later on. Right now, I'm really trying to draw the hair well, because I think that as a young artist, I could only draw about 2 or 3 hairstyles, and they all had that kind of Tumblr swoosh in them, and I really didn't want to fall victim to that with this redraw. I wanted to kind of really hammer it in that I can at least draw, middle-aged men's haircuts now. I struggle a lot with the eyes for some reason. I don't know if it was just because of, again, the intensity of Andrew Rannells' facial expressions and the references that I was seeing on Google, but I had to redo them quite a few times. As you can see here, I'm really struggling and it looks really weird. It is definitely better than how I drew the eyes in the original piece, and also I had a phase for a very long time where I didn't color in the eyes, nor did I add a lower eyelid, nor did I color in the iris, which, full disclosure, is just a really limiting way of drawing. It kind of prohibits you from doing any sort of emotion at all in the face, so I'm really happy I eventually broke out of that. You can also see that I learned how a tie works, how a tie looks in the first place. I learned how colors work as well, how the folds in clothes work. I mean, I still don't really know how those work, but I've sort of learned enough to, I guess, fake it where I can and, not fake it where I can't, but it definitely looks a lot more like clothes than the original piece does. Right now, I'm just going back in and I'm cleaning stuff up a bit. It's kind of boring to watch, but I just like to refine everything, just make it look a little sharp before I eventually start coloring. And here I am redoing the eyes again, just to make it look, again, more like the original piece. I'm really trying to just make it look as close as possible. And because I am fundamentally really lazy, again, I don't do line art, I just darken the sketch layer. And then what I do is I create 2 layers. I use Gaussian blur, however you say it, on the duplicated line art layer. And then I reduce the opacity until it achieves the effect I would like. And then that's my line art. I think that it creates a nice sort of faded effect. And then I also set it to multiply. I forget to do that here. I'm going to do that in, I think, like 5 seconds. And another thing with coloring that I've realized over the years, and I think is important, especially for beginner artists to realize, is that pale people, like even very pale people, are not like 100% white. Like in the original drawing, it's basically like 100% incredibly pale, and that's not how the reference looks, but that's also just not how people look. Like I'm a very, 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 very pale person, but even when I draw myself, it's still not as pale as I could draw myself. Not that I don't look like that, just that I'm not going to be like hex code 000, like no one is. It's never going to be extremely 100% pale. And again, for the hair, I'm just making it a bit lighter than I did originally, and I'm thinking more about like a cohesive palette, making everything kind of less saturated. I usually like to stay away from extremely saturated colors, going for more of like I wouldn't even say pastel, just like definitely desaturated. And because my line art is on a multiply layer, I just go back in, usually with the hair color, like 99% of the time, and I'll color in the edges of the eyes, the eyebrows, and also the shading thing I do under the neck that I've always done, and I've kind of never not done. Even in the original piece, I'm doing like a rudimentary form of that, but I just color that in to make it darker. And again, I'm using a very desaturated limited color palette, so I'm reusing the same white for the eyes and the teeth as I am for the dress shirt, which again, even though it's white, is not 000 hex code, which I'm pretty sure in the original it's not even colored in. I'm just using the white of the background as the color, which is just a bad habit, and also just not how clothes work. Pure white and pure black do of course have their place in pieces of art, and they can be used to an incredibly effective degree. The point is, however, to understand why you're using them and when to use them, and I would say like usually most of the time it's not the place to use them. I'm also going in and adding the blush like I do for all of my characters. First I'm just recoloring that, and again I was doing a sort of like rudimentary of like very you can't even, it's so faint you can't even tell on the original piece. But that's something like I've always liked to do in my art pieces, just add like a little, like even like a faux makeup look kind of for the blush. And I've refined how I've done it over the years. Like I like to erase like the waterline. I'm gonna do that in a little bit and kind of make it so it just adds more life to the face. Like that's my main goal here. I actually like literally looked back at my art from 2017, and I've always been trying to do a blush effect, but I just used to literally not even know like where to place it on the face, like where, human beings can and cannot blush. So I'm definitely glad I learned that. Here I'm just changing the colors a little bit of the blush because I didn't really like it initially. And then what I like to do is choose a more saturated, usually a more red color as well, and just add in like more of an intense blush. And now that I'm done with coloring, what I do is on Procreate, I just merge all of the layers and then create a new clipping layer on top of them and use a light blue color on that layer, which I set to multiply to shade. I know that it's a pretty bad crutch to just use light blue on a multiply layer to shade, so I am trying to move away from that, but what can you do? You can see some like very rudimentary shading in the original piece. Like, and by rudimentary I mean like that weird pink shade that you can see on the forehead and on the neck. I just had no idea like what a light source was or how to make anything look right in a way that things look like in real life, like any semblance of recognition. But I was trying my best. And like I mentioned, the light blue color, I am trying to try out this thing where I use the blue for the skin and the hair, but I use a more reddish tone for clothing. I don't know if I'll stick with it, but it's just something I'm trying out, and I wanted to try it in this piece because I thought that the light blue would look weird on the shirt. And this is looking very saturated, but I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna lower the opacity and be done with it, just call it a day. Well, I can't remember exactly. I probably did try to shade the hair on the original piece, but it was probably too dark for anything to show up. And then for the clothing, I think I just was afraid and completely stayed away from it because, again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I genuinely didn't even know what a light source was. So now that I've finished with my shading, I then go in and just create a new layer, which I set to add, which is again kind of just a crutch, but I like to use a yellowy shade. This is too yellowy. I'm going to adjust it. I like to use a yellow shade for the highlights, and for this I just decided to keep it as simple as possible and only do it on the hair. Really, usually I do more, but again, because in the original piece I only had it on the hair, I'm keeping it only on the hair. And I'm using a warm yellow for the sun in the background. I don't know where the sun came from in the original piece. I don't know why I did that. I think maybe because I had seen a lot of artists do that sort of effect where you have an object behind the character's head so the head pops out more. And I wanted to try to recreate that, and I like sun imagery, so I just added that in. Not asking questions, just going to recreate it, and in a very more efficient way because I know what a copy and paste tool is now, and I can use that to my advantage, and I know how to like duplicate a layer and use transform and stuff like that, which is definitely a very good tool to use. And now for the finishing touch of the hello bubble, which I'm adding in here with the same exact color as the tie. And as I sort of add the final touches to this piece, I did want to talk about something that's important to me, which is that while I have kind of made fun of myself a lot in this video, I am very proud of my 12-year-old self, or my 13-year-old self, I'm pretty sure, for posting this online, because it is a very scary thing to put yourself out there, especially as a beginning artist. And I'm really happy that I didn't give up, because it is an embarrassing thing to be bad at something and to post it online, and it is a scary thing to try to keep getting better. But I didn't give up, and I'm pretty shocked and impressed, and I'm also very happy to see that, it got like 35 likes, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at it, you realize that it is a lot. And nobody was mean, nobody was rude, and it was just good space for me to put my work into. And I'm really happy to look at how far I've come And again, I'm so happy that I started and it didn't just turn into something that I had always wished I had done, but never actually did. And for that, I'm really proud of myself. And, if you're watching this and you don't really draw, but you've always wanted to, just start. Because, there's never any better time than now. And with that, I have pretty much finished this piece. I'm just adding in some colors here, and there we go. I mean, do you guys think I improved? Do you think I didn't? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for watching.